Is that Rocky's dad?
No, I was married to Rocky's dad.
Who the hell is that?
Just a guy I used to know.
Damn, it's good to see you.
Where have you been?
Been on the road. Damn, you're getting taller. She must be pouring that health food shit into you.
Rocky Dennis was the victim of a disease that disfigured his skull, but he fell victim to something far more ruthless: cinematic fiction. Hollywood sanitized his life, swept the truth about his biker mother under the rug, and turned his death into a high-priced tearjerker. But today, we're tearing off that prosthetic mask to face the real countenance and the haunting life behind it. Come with me as we turn back the clock, returning to the starting point before Hollywood ever laid hands on the destiny of this mother and son. Before the camera lenses, before Cher, and before all the empty platitudes about an inspiring story, you need to see how Rusty and Rocky actually lived a life that was raw, painful, defiant, and full of secrets that have never been told. The age 7 death sentence and the kid who refused to die. Roy Lee Dennis was born on December 4, 1961, in Glendora, California, into a family already filled with chaos and instability. His mother, Florence "Rusty" Tullis, gave him the nickname Rocky because he would only sleep when she rocked him in her arms. Neither parent could have imagined that this simple nickname would one day become the symbol of a battle against death itself. As a child, Rocky only seemed mildly sickly, dealing with sinus and ear infections that appeared harmless at first. But everything changed after a routine tonsil surgery at age 2, when X-rays revealed terrifying abnormalities in his skull. After months of testing at UCLA Medical Center, doctors finally named the condition craniodiaphyseal dysplasia. At the time, only 6 cases had ever been recorded worldwide. The disease caused abnormal calcium buildup in the skull, slowly thickening the bone and crushing the brain. Doctors warned that Rocky would eventually lose his sight, his mental abilities, and die before the age of 7, before he could even learn to read. Most parents would have broken under that diagnosis. Rusty did not. She listened to the doctors, looked them in the eye, and answered with one defiant phrase, "We'll see." That was not denial. It was a declaration of war. And to understand why Rusty fought so fiercely, you have to look beyond the 1985 Hollywood film, because the mother shown on screen was only a softened version of the real woman. Florence "Rusty" Tullis, gritty muse or extremist mother? Florence "Rusty" Tullis, born Steinberg, came into the world on May 29, 1936, in Brooklyn, New York. Her father was a truck driver. Her family was Jewish. Growing up in a loud, crowded Brooklyn neighborhood, Rusty was sharp from a very young age and way too rebellious for the school system to handle. At 13, she was expelled from junior high for truancy. By 14, she was smoking weed and running with motorcycle gangs. At 15, Rusty dropped out of school entirely and took a job as a hoochie-coochie dancer at Coney Island. At that point, she wasn't even old enough to hold a learner's permit. At 17, Rusty married her first husband, Tommy Mason, a truck driver. A year or 2 later, their first child was born, a baby boy named Joshua. Keep that name in mind, we'll come back to him later. That marriage quickly fell apart. Rusty took her kid and moved back in with her parents, then, a few years later, tied the knot with her second husband, Roy Dennis. The two moved to California, and in 1961, Rocky was born. From very early on, Rusty built a philosophy of life unlike any other. She firmly believed that if a person could think themselves sick, they could think themselves well. It was an ironclad belief, unshakable, and she applied that philosophy to Rocky from the time he was a toddler. Every time Rocky got a headache, and he got them almost every single day, Rusty didn't rush to find medicine. Instead, she ordered him to go to his room and make himself well. An order, an exercise, a rock-solid conviction. However, to many around them, from teachers to medical professionals of the era, this looked like a dangerous form of extremism. They argued it was Rusty's way of denying reality, dumping the burden of self-healing onto a disfigured child instead of giving him proper medical care. Did this method actually give Rocky the strength to rise above his fate? Or was it just a psychological barrier that meant he was never allowed to be weak? Was it unconditional maternal love? Or was it an avoidance of a pain she just couldn't face? Those were the questions Rocky himself had to wrestle with throughout his formative years, and they form the mystery we're going to unravel later in this story. There is a detail about Rusty that the movie only skims over. She wasn't just friendly with people who rode motorcycles. She was a full-fledged member of the Turks, a real-deal biker gang, not some weekend cosplayers. These were people who lived hard, loved hard, and didn't put on acts. And they loved Rocky absolutely unconditionally. But despite all the criticism from professionals regarding her extreme parenting style, Rusty found solace in a completely different world, one where no one judged her flaws. That was her biker family. In the movie, the character Gar, played by Sam Elliott, stands by Rusty as a calm, dependable man. In real life, that man's actual name was Bernie Tullis, Rusty's longtime partner. That entire biker crew around them was Rocky's real family. And what about the drugs? The film implies that Rusty used drugs because she was suffering, drowning under the weight of raising a terminally ill child. A forgivable reason. A reason the audience could easily sympathize with. Rusty flatly rejected that interpretation in interviews. She said she partied all the time, and drugs were simply part of that party lifestyle. This wasn't a heartbroken woman looking for a crutch. This was a woman who lived life in the fast lane and was entirely willing to admit it on camera. So, what would a woman like that, a biker, a drug user, a dropout, an unconventional mood have to say when the press came knocking after her son's death? This is where the story gets truly bitter. $48 million, 15 grand, and the Hollywood lie. Before we talk numbers, there's something few people realize. The movie Mask almost never happened. When Anna Hamilton Phelan brought her initial script to Universal Pictures, the studio turned it down. The reason was blunt. Nobody wanted to see a movie about a disfigured kid. Phelan had to rewrite version after version. The project languished. And then Cher, who at the time was still known mostly as a pop star, committed to the lead role. The green light followed immediately. The story of Rocky Dennis was almost tossed into the Hollywood trash bin, until a pop icon decided she wanted to test her acting chops. In 1985, Mask hit theaters across America. Directed by Peter Bogdanovich, it starred Cher as Rusty and Eric Stoltz as Rocky. The film grossed $48,230,000 at the domestic box office, a smash hit. Audiences wept in theaters. Critics raved. Meanwhile, Rusty Dennis was paid $15,000 for the rights to her life story and that of her dead son. Let that number sink in for a moment. $48 million versus 15 grand. And here is the part that makes that figure cut even deeper. The bulk of that $15,000 didn't go into a savings account or a down payment on a new home. It went straight toward the medical bills of Joshua Rusty's eldest son, who was battling AIDS at the height of the epidemic. Rusty didn't sell Rocky's story to cash in. She sold it to try and keep her other son alive. Beyond the money, the way Hollywood manufactured Rusty's story was also evident in how they controlled both the soul and the sound of the piece. On the other side of the lens, Eric Stoltz was experiencing something else entirely. Every day before filming, he had to sit perfectly still in a makeup chair for about 4 hours, while effects artists applied a silicone mask to replicate Rocky's disfigured face. Stoltz once recalled that there were times he'd wear that mask around the studio lot, and even out to local coffee shops. People avoided his gaze. They looked away. For a few short weeks, he tasted a fraction of the reality Rocky had lived with for 16 years. The role earned Stoltz a Golden Globe nomination, but it also proved that Hollywood just needed a mannequin to play out a tragedy, rather than truly honoring his actual soul. That control got even uglier during post-production music selection. Rocky Dennis was a massive Bruce Springsteen fan. Director Peter Bogdanovich knew this and crafted the entire original soundtrack around music by The Boss. But Universal Pictures, in an effort to maximize commercial appeal, quietly replaced all of Springsteen's music with Bob Seger tracks because they couldn't strike a licensing deal with the record label. They did this without giving a heads-up to the director or Rusty. When she appeared on the show People Are Talking in 1985, Rusty exposed that shameless move in a single sentence. "I don't think Rocky even knew who Bob Seger was." She didn't need to say another word. Bogdanovich sued Universal Pictures for $19 million, claiming the music swap violated his Final Cut privileges. The Springsteen tracks were finally restored in the 2004 Director's Cut DVD. It took 20 years for Rocky to finally get the right soundtrack to his own life story. But at the end of the day, all the drama over cash, music, and studio manipulation was just the surface level of the fairy tale Hollywood tried to paint. Because when you strip away every bit of that glamorous facade, what's left is what truly leaves us speechless. The actual night Rocky left this world. A night without dawn. When the fairy tale ends. By September 1978, Rocky was 16 years old. His health was deteriorating fast. In his final weeks, he had to use a wheelchair to get around. He had outlived the doctor's death sentence by nearly a decade, almost 10 bonus years, that no one back in 1965 would have dared to promise. But his body had reached its absolute limit. The headaches at the end of his life had escalated to a point where no medication could touch them. There is a medical detail that even fans of the movie rarely know. As his skull bones continued to thicken and push forward, doctors concluded that Rocky could no longer close his eyes completely when he slept. He slept with his eyes halfway open. For 16 years, the disease had robbed Rocky of even the most basic human comfort, the ability to close his eyes and just rest. Rocky's 16th birthday on December 4th, 1977, was his last. The Turks showed up in full force. The party was loud, packed with laughter and the roar of motorcycle engines. Rocky blew out his candles through the haze of a headache, but he was still smiling. Bernie later recalled that evening, it felt like Rocky was saying goodbye to each and every one of them, though none of them realized it at the time. In early October 1978, the whole family and the biker crew went out for dinner at a favorite local spot. It was obvious to everyone just how weak Rocky had become. He went home that night with a splitting headache, the same agonizing companion he had carried for 16 long years. Rusty did what she had done his entire life. She sent him to his room and told him to make himself well. It was a reflex that had become second nature, a ritual of belief that mother and son had pursued to the absolute extreme. But that night, instead of fighting through it like he always did, her ironclad conviction hit the final unyielding boundary of death. The miracle never came. There was no more self-healing. Rocky never woke up from that sleep. On the morning of October 4th, 1978, Rocky quietly passed away. This is the exact moment where reality and cinema take two completely different paths. In the movie, it's a heartbreaking scene where Rusty discovers her son's body, a high-priced, tear-jerking cinematic moment. But in real life, Rusty wasn't even there. She was busy at a lawyer's office, and it was actually Bernie who called her with the news. Looking back, the way Rocky passed away alone in his sleep makes you really think about the think-yourself-well philosophy Rusty had drilled into him. Was it the ultimate superpower that allowed Rocky to refuse to see himself as just a patient? Or was it an invisible straitjacket forcing him to wear a mask of bravery even when his body was screaming in agony? Rusty chose that style of parenting like a religious dogma, and she never regretted it. But on that fateful night, it left behind a cruel lesson. Sometimes, the greatest act of love isn't forcing the person you care about to be strong, it's giving them permission to break under the weight of human limitation. Whatever the answer, Rocky's story leaves behind a haunting silence. And to truly understand why that tough-as-nails mother accepted a measly $15,000 to sell her life story to Hollywood, you can't just look at Rocky. You have to meet someone else, a person the movie completely wiped from her life. Joshua, the forgotten heir. Joshua Mason was Rusty's eldest son from her first marriage to Tommy Mason. He was a few years older than Rocky, and he was completely absent from the movie Mask. According to records, this was something that clearly made Rusty unhappy. In 1985, when the movie premiered, Joshua was living in San Francisco, working as a writer. A year later, in 1986, he was diagnosed with Kaposi's sarcoma, the cancer deeply tied to the AIDS crisis of the mid-80s, which was a death sentence at the time. Joshua was openly gay. He described Rusty as a mother who always had his back. She had wanted grandkids and had even suggested the idea of a sperm bank to her son. It's a detail far too human, far too real, for anyone to make up. Joshua passed away in 1987 at the age of 32. In less than a decade, Rusty lost Rocky, and then she lost Joshua. The woman who claimed she didn't believe in death had to bury both of her sons. And now, think back to that tiny payout Hollywood gave her. That money wasn't enough to start a new life, but to Rusty, it was everything she had to try and keep Joshua alive, her other son, who was also being stripped away by fate. But beyond those financial struggles, the bond between her and Joshua was built on that same radical philosophy of life. She didn't believe in death, and she passed that stubbornness on to her son. In his final years, as she watched Joshua slowly fade away from the disease of the century, Rusty clung to that belief like a final shield against a brutal reality. That's why, in an interview with the Chicago Tribune, she stated with haunting certainty, "Joshua didn't believe in death. And neither do I." The final ride on a three-wheeler. After Rocky died, Rusty packed up and moved from California to San Francisco. There, she turned to Buddhism. She began working as a counselor for drug addicts, the exact type of person she used to be. She planned to work at the Shanti Project, an organization that supported terminally ill patients, including those with AIDS. It was a job she would come to understand on a deeply painful personal level when Joshua fell ill. The woman who used to be defined by chaos was now building something quieter. But she never gave up motorcycles. Not until the very end. There's a small detail about Rusty that speaks louder than any headline. Years after Rocky passed away, she still kept a few of his things close by, including an old t-shirt. The woman who didn't believe in death, didn't believe in fear, and never asked why me, that same woman still needed something to hold on to on her hardest days. Even Rusty Dennis had those nights. On October 14, 2006, Rusty, now going by her birth name, Florence Tullis, was riding her three-wheeled motorcycle when the right wheel suddenly flew off the axle. She lost control and crashed hard into the curb. Because she was a fiercely independent woman who had long since cut ties with her old social circles, nobody knew when the accident happened. Her friends and family were completely in the dark. They only accidentally pieced the heartbreaking puzzle together later when they read a short blurb in the San Gabriel Valley Tribune about an unidentified 70-year-old woman in a motorcycle crash. Rusty had broken both of her legs and punctured a lung. She survived the impact, of course she did. She was Rusty Dennis, but the resulting infection was something even she couldn't beat. She passed away on November 11, 2006, at Beverly Hospital in Montebello, California. She was 70 years old. She died exactly the way she lived, on the move, on her own terms, completely unstoppable. The broken mirror and the definition of love. When you strip away the Hollywood glamour, this is who the real Rocky was. An honor roll student, voted best friend and most beautiful soul by his classmates. He knew the night sky by heart, could name every constellation, and once fell in love with a blind girl, the one person who could see his soul without judging his face. When doctors suggested plastic surgeries to fix him, Rocky asked one haunting question: who am I going to see in the mirror if I change my face? He chose to keep his face. He chose to be himself. And Rusty Dennis? She was not the perfect mother in any traditional sense. She was rough, reckless, abrasive, and deeply flawed. But in Rocky's world, she was the one person who never treated him like a disease. She saw him as a whole human being and gave him the respect the world denied him. Was that unconditional love, cruelty, or both? Maybe the answer no longer matters. Rocky Dennis died at home, in his sleep. No machines, no hospital, no loss of dignity. His mother promised him that, and she kept her promise. Rusty died the way she lived, on the move, on her own terms, impossible to contain. There is no neat redemption arc here, no flawless maternal grace, just something harder and more real. The truth, messy and complicated. So here's the final question. Why is Hollywood comfortable honoring a middle-class mother who loses a child, but feels the need to sanitize a biker, drug-using mother before putting her grief on screen? Is a mother's pain only worthy when she looks like one of us? Drop a comment below. How much of this did you actually know before today? Like and subscribe for more real stories behind Hollywood's favorite legends.